Hey everyone, today I'm thrilled to introduce one of the standout features in Spring Boot 3.4.0, the Client HTTP Request Factory Builder. This new interface is designed to significantly simplify and enhance the way we build and configure Client HTTP Request Factory instance in our Spring Boot applications. Traditionally, configuring HTTP clients involved a lot of boilerplate code and manual setup, especially when we switching between different HTTP client implementations like Apache HTTP client, OK HTTP, or the default Java HTTP URL connections. However, with the Spring Boot 3.4.0, the Client HTTP Request Factory Builder brings a unified approach to this process, making it more streamlined. So what makes the Client HTTP Request Factory Builder so special? If we talked about now, actually we are going to talk about some key benefits of this Client HTTP Request Factory Builder. So it's actually supports for multiple HTTP clients. Spring Boot 3.4.0 introduces support for auto-configuring REST template and web client to use different HTTP clients, including Reactor native HTTP client, JDK HTTP client, Apache HTTP component, JT client, and simple JDK HTTP URL connection. This allows developers to choose the most suitable HTTP client for their needs. Second one, Client HTTP Request Factory Builder. A new Client HTTP Request Factory Builder interface has been introduced, which provides a unified way to build and configure different types of Client HTTP Request Factory. This makes it easier to apply custom settings and configurations. Now, third feature is this customization options. Developers can now customize the behavior of the HTTP clients more easily. For example, if you want to disable HTTP 1.1 TLS upgrades, or maybe if you want to configure connection pooling, or maybe if you want to set the timeouts. So those kind of customizations now available. Enhance the security. It's actually enhance the support for SSL or TLS settings, ensuring secure communication with external services. Now we will talk about, actually we will compare with the previous version like this, whatever the new release for this Client HTTP Request Factory in 3.4. So now we will compare the same with the previous version of this Spring Boot, that is 3.3.x. So now let's go over there. So now if we talked about this Spring Boot version of 3.3.x, so it's actually provide the limited HTTP client options. The previous version primarily supported simple client HTTP request factory using HTTP URL connection and HTTP components client HTTP request factory using Apache client. It's also support basic configurations. Configurations options were limited and customizations was more manual. No unified builder means there was no unified builder interface for creating different types of client HTTP request factory. Now we will we'll check that what features actually they have given in this new release, that is Spring Boot 3.4.0. It's actually support for multiple HTTP clients, means it's actually introduced support for various HTTP clients including Reactor native HTTP client, JDK HTTP client, Apache HTTP components, JT client, and simple JDK HTTP URL connection. Second one, it's also provide unified client HTTP request factory builder. This interface provides a unified way to build and configure different types of client HTTP request factory. It's actually making it easier to apply custom settings. Third one, enhance configurations option. So developers can now customize HTTP clients more easily, including settings, connection timeouts, read timeouts, proxy settings, and SSL TLS configurations. It's also improved default behavior, means for HTTP clients now follows redirects by default, which can be disabled if we need it, if we need actually. It's also enhanced the security. It's enhanced the support for SSL or TLS settings, ensure secure communication with external services. So these are the difference between previous version with this current Spring Boot 3.4.0. As we can see over here, it's actually support multiple things. It's give us the many things to do actually. It's we can do multiple things more easily if we compare with the previous version. In next, what we are going to do, we just need to create one project and we are going to implement these clients like HTTP clients, so that we can understand that how we are going to use this feature in our project. Now basically we need to create one Spring Boot application, and then we need to implement this client HTTP request factory builder. So how we are going to create that project? So we need to go to the Spring Initializer site and we need to choose the dependencies Spring Boot Starter Web. So I have already created the project and imported in my editor. You can use any editor like Eclipse, IntelliJ. I am using Eclipse editor over here. So now if we check the dependencies over here, the one point you need to you need to check that you are selecting that 3.4.0. This version you need to choose for the Spring Boot, because this is the new feature we are going to implement in this project, in this session actually. Okay, so you need to choose these dependencies. Other than this, we have just added this Spring Boot Starter Web dependencies over here. The rest dependencies, these are not mandatory, these are the optional dependencies, but this is the mandatory dependencies that we have used over here, and this is the version we have choose. Next, we are going to create that configuration class where we are going to implement different types of HTTP client factory using client HTTP request factory builder that is introduced under this Spring Boot version 3.4.0. Now we are going to create one class over here, that is a configuration class like HTTP client config. Here we are going to keeping all the configurations, so that's why we need to annotate this particular class with configuration annotation. Okay, so next what we are going to do, we just need to create that JDK client HTTP request factory builder. So how we are going to doing that? So for that we need to create one method over here, public. The return type of this method will be JDK client HTTP request factory. Okay, JDK client HTTP request factory. Client HTTP request factory. If you see, this is coming from this package. Okay, let's say the name of this method will be JDK client HTTP request factory builder. Okay, and it should be return this one. So how we are going to create this? So here we are going to use this client HTTP request factory builder. Okay, dot JDK dot JDK dot build, and under this build we can directly return this one, or else we can return like we can actually if you see the build method actually, so either we can pass this null or else it's actually having this client HTTP request factory setting. If you see this particular builder class available since 3.4.0, and here we are going to use these settings. If you see this settings class, it's actually having this redirects, connection timeout, read timeout, SSL bundle. So all this kind of settings we are going to set under this settings client request factory settings class. If you see, it is available only introduced under this new version, that is 3.4.0. So these settings actually we need to create over here. Okay, so this kind of settings we need to set. So in this configuration class, so here we are going to use these settings: time duration, HTTP. So if you see that client HTTP request factory settings dot defaults, then here with connection timeout and with read timeout, here we are setting the connection timeout with 3 seconds and the read timeout is the 5 seconds. And finally we need to pass this settings method under this build method. Okay, so that means this JDK client is ready now. So next, what else we need to do? We just need to create another JDK REST template. Okay, so for that we need to create one bean annotation, then public REST template, JDK REST template. Okay, so here we are going to use this REST template builder, REST template builder. Okay, so here return builder dot request factory, this one, and here we need to call this particular method JDK builder. Okay, dot build. So that means our REST template also ready, right? So what we have done now, we have just create one JDK client HTTP request builder using this client HTTP request factory builder interface, and we are passing these settings over here. Now next we are going to create one service. So from the service actually we need to use this REST template. Let me add this one. So here that service is generated. Now here we need to use this JDK REST template, and it will actually call this get for object, and here we need to pass this URL and it will fetch the data and it will return the data as a string. Next we need to create one controller. So from the controller basically we need to call this particular method. So here this controller actually, so we have created one get API over here which will fetch the data from, this is the URL. So that means this particular JSON placeholder, this is the one URL. So this URL actually basically we are going to call using this REST template. So if you see over here in the service layer, whatever the URL actually passing, so that URL directly called from this REST template. That means we are directly calling this service and we are directly calling this particular URL, so that we are in a response we are going to get the details for this post 1, right? This is the post ID actually. If we open this particular like URL, we can see like this one. If we directly hit this only post, so it will give us all the post, but like if we place only /1, then it will give the data only for this single post, right? Now basically we need to call that API, this fetch data from browser, so that it will internally call that particular URL from the newly configured this REST template, so that we can see that how it is working. It is working fine or not. So for checking this application, we just need to start this application. So from the main application, just right click over here and start this application as Java application. So it will start in a time, it will not take much time. Once it will start, then from the browser we will hit this particular get API that we have defining under this controller, and then we will get the data from this post, right? This fetch data API, this is a get API that we need to call. So the application already started. Now from the browser we will hit this API. So this is the fetch data. If we call this, then it will obviously, yeah, if you see that it's return the data. If we match from this user ID1, this title and the body. So user ID1, this is the title and this is the body. That means the same response we are receiving over here also. So that means we can say like that this JDK client HTTP request factory that is already configured with this newly feature of this Spring Boot 3.4.0. In next we are going to create another actually HTTP client, that is HTTP components client HTTP request, using this same client HTTP request factory builder interface. So now as we configure this JDK client HTTP request factory builder, so now actually in similar fashion we are going to create the another HTTP client, that is the HTTP components client actually. Okay, so how we are going to, so let me copy this one, and here we just need to mention it like HTTP client request factory builder. Okay, so here instead of this JDK, here we are going to choose this HTTP components. Okay, if you see, this will be written this HTTP components client HTTP factory request factory. Okay, here we are going to pass the same kind of settings. Now what else we need to do, we are going to create another REST template. Instead of this JDK, it will be a HTTP components REST template. Okay, HTTP component REST template, and here instead of this it will be, we need to copy this one, because here we are going to use this HTTP component request factory builder. So now in similar fashion we have completed this one, right? Means we have configured this HTTP client, but here it's saying this client 5 HTTP SSL. Okay, let me see, we're missing something. Bean creation is failed. Okay, let me see. So as it is giving us this HTTP client actually we are using over here, so that's why we need to add one dependencies, that is called the HTTP client 5. So these dependencies we need to add over here, because we are going to use these HTTP components over here. Previously this JDK client, for this if you want to use, so for that we don't need any dependencies, but if we want to use these HTTP components, so for that we need to use this HTTP client 5. So now that particular issues will be resolved. If you see, it will be start soon. The application got started now. So now actually if we want to use this HTTP client template, so now we can easily use in a service. We just need to, instead of this, we just need to change it to the HTTP component. Okay, we can easily use this one. If you see, there is a minimum changes is required, right? Now we can go to the browser and we can call this particular service so that we can get the data, right? We have just called this service and we are getting the data in a response. Okay, now if we want to use another client like that is called a Reactor client, so we can also do the similar kind of thing, similar kind of approach we need to apply over here. Like here we are going to use this Reactor HTTP client, this one, client HTTP request factory builder dot reactor. So for JDK we have used this JDK. For HTTP components, HTTP client, we have this HTTP components. For Reactor client we have used the Reactor. So this Reactor client factory, now here we are going to create another bin similar to this one, and here we need to use this React client factory, and then it will be a React component. Okay, so if you see, we have created another bin over here. So because as we are using this reactor, so that's why it's saying that reactor.net is not available, because we need to add another dependencies which is needed to use this reactor net. So that's why we need to add another dependencies over here, that is reactor net dependency. So after adding this dependency, that issues that what we are facing actually, that will be resolved, because as we are using this reactor, so that's why this reactor, okay, maybe we need to just stop this one. Then again we just need to refresh this as Maven build, update project, then we can start this application again. Now if you see, the application got started successfully. Now the similar way we can also use this React component REST template over here. Instead of this HTTP, we just need to change the name so that we can use this React component REST template instead of the HTTP or the JDK. Once it will start, then again we can see from the browser, we just need to call this particular API and see that response is coming or not. Now the response is coming successfully from the browser. So that means we are successfully able to connect with these three clients from this REST template, right? So in this way we can configure different types of client with just minimum kind of change. If you see over here, we are using this three client with just minimum change over here. As we wrap up our discussion on Spring Boot 3.4, it's clear that this release brings significant improvements to how we manage HTTP client configurations, all thanks to the new ClientHttp Request Factory Builder. The introductions of ClientHttp Request Factory Builder has truly revolutionized the way we create and configure various client HTTP request factory implementation. Here is a quick recap of the key advantages this builder interface brings to the table. First one is the flexibility. Like Spring Boot 3.4.0 offers more HTTP client options, providing greater flexibility to choose the best client for your application. Unified configurations. This actually interface simplifies the process of building and configuring different types of client HTTP request factory, as we have seen in this particular example. It's also enhanced the customization, easier customization options for settings, timeouts, handling redirects and configuring SSL TLS. It's also improved the securities for secure communication. So these improvements in Spring Boot 3.4.0 makes it easier to manage HTTP clients configurations, improve performance and reliability, and also enhance the security for your Spring application. In conclusions, in Spring Boot 3.4 with this client HTTP request factory builder not only simplifies the configurations of HTTP client but also empower developers with the flexibility and control needed to build robust, secure and high performance application. Thank you for your time. See you in my next videos. Until next, keep coding.